Welcome to Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. On this podcast, we journey through the devastating experience of the death of a child. Grief is seldom discussed openly in our culture, and the death of a child makes people feel even more uncomfortable. We approach the topic openly and honestly, speaking to people who have lost loved ones and experts who help care for them. Whether you are a parent experiencing loss or someone who wants to support another going through this tragedy, this podcast strives to offer hope and help.
Welcome to episode number 312 of Losing a Child, Always Andy's Mom. I'm Mercy Larson, Andy's mom. Today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Dave. Dave is Jeannine's dad, and Dave is a fellow podcaster like myself, so you will hear more about his podcast and the book he wrote as we listen, and know that I will be on his show in just a few short weeks, so you can watch for that as well. This episode is another one that was sponsored, so thank you so much today for Linda. I am going to read what Linda wrote as she sponsored and gave $125 to the podcast. So she wrote, "Today, our beloved Paige would be 28 years old. I was the mom with a large button of Paige when we spoke of her becoming ill with mono that turned into HLH. Today, on her birthday, we are donating an upcoming episode to celebrate her heavenly birthday. We miss and love our Paige always and forever. Love, Paige's mom." If you want to listen to Paige's story, that is episode 163. But thank you so much to Linda and your family for your $125 donation. Again, if you want to share your story on the podcast, you can email me at Marcy, M-A-R-C-Y, at andysmom.com. If you would like to make a donation to the podcast and sponsor it in your child's memory or in the memory of someone else, you can feel free to do that as well. The easiest way to do that is to go to the andysmom.com website and click on the donate page. That will take you right to where you need to be. Right now, I just want you to sit back and enjoy listening to Dave, Jeannine's dad. Thank you so much, Dave, for agreeing to come on the Always Andy's Mom podcast today.
It's my pleasure, Mercy. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be great because you are a fellow podcaster. So this is not a new thing for you. And at some point, the next month or so after this release, actually just shortly after this release, I think I'm going to be interviewed to be on your podcast. So we're kind of going to do a little back and forth here, but I love it that it's getting started.
Me too. And I love doing podcast exchanges, particularly with other podcast hosts who align with my philosophy and align with my journey. And, so I think it's going to be great once we get started. So, and I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be in September, by the way, that we get
that
together.
Will be. So. That will be. And you're going to be released, I think, the very end of August. So it'll be perfect. But why don't you start out, Dave, by just telling us about your daughter, Jeannine?
Yes, and first of all, Jeannine has a very unusual spelling. It's Jeannine.
I noticed that.
Yeah, and it wasn't a typical spelling. My wife actually picked out the name, and of course I went along with it. And that's the spelling that she chose. And I think the spelling of her name is unique, but I think it also speaks to the uniqueness of my daughter. And I think we think everybody's children, all of our children are unique and have special gifts, but Jeannine was special in a lot of different ways. She was my only daughter. She was the middle child she has one older brother and one younger brother. And I always speak of Jeannine in the present tense because she's always with me. She has a smile that lights up her room. She is passionate about who she loves. She was passionate about what she believes in. She was an advocate kind of for the underdog. She would advocate for me when people would kind of try to poke fun at me or do a lot of things. She would stick up for me. When she's a friend, she's a friend. She's just, her smile again could light up her room, and she's beautiful from the inside out. Very opinionated, but very respectful. She defied conventional wisdom. She taught me that conventional wisdom is highly overrated. She's a free spirit. Free spirits are not meant to be reined in, they're meant to be guided. And she taught me a lot about dealing with free-spirited individuals as my daughter than I could than I could ever teach her as a parent. So, I learned a lot from her. We used to love to go to concerts together. That was the biggest memories we have, or the first memories I have of hers when she was 12 years old. We went to a Goo Goo Dolls and Gin Blossoms concert at the New
Uh-huh.
York State Fair. And we always shared our love of music together. And after she and I call it transition to from the physical world to the spiritual world, music, a lot of music that we listened to, or a lot of music that I enjoyed, helped me get in touch with my emotions and really helped me develop some clarity, particularly in the early to middle phases of my grief. But she was, she's just a great young lady. She continues to inspire me today. I have pictures of her just all over the house. And she's a part of everything that I do. She informs everything that I do. And together, I feel that we are a team in terms of moving forward and helping others who are dealing with life challenges. So, Marcy, that's Jeannine in a nutshell. And
Yeah.
she was 18 when she transitioned.
Yeah. It's so funny hearing you talk about some of these things because they really resonate with me. First of all, music, I think, is so powerful in your grief and your emotions and things like that. So I sing in my praise and worship band at church, and I couldn't for really about 3 years. I didn't sing, although over one of those we were kind of closed for the pandemic. So I don't know that hardly counts. But when I came back, still, there are songs that will make me really emotional. Just this last Sunday, I sang and I just got to one or two phrases in a song, and it just got me emotional. It gets me thinking about Andy. It gets me thinking about my grief. It gets me thinking about my faith journey. And anyway, it's really, really powerful. So I really appreciate that. I mean, Andy was obviously a head chorister for the Grand Rapids Choir of Men and Boys. And so he did a lot of singing in those concerts. I mean, I feel him. I feel him there. I close my eyes, I can hear him singing. So it's just very, very powerful. And honestly, some of the times I feel closest to him or when I go to those concerts and I sit and I close my eyes and I feel it, right? I just feel him. So I appreciate you saying that. I think I've had some of my more powerful moments with that as well. And as far as doing things with Andy, if you look here at my recording studio is Andy's bedroom. And it's Andy's bedroom for a reason, because I feel like we sort of do it together, he and I. And it's the right place to do the podcast. It's not where I did the podcast for about the first year and a half or so, but then it felt right to move in here. It felt right to have this space be our space where we kind of do this together.
And I think that's pretty cool, and it also resonates with one of my favorite quotes from Maury Schwartz, who was the subject of Tuesdays with Maury by
Uh-huh.
Mitch Albom, where he says that death ends a life, not a relationship. And I'm a firm believer with that for us to integrate our grief, we need to move forward with the best qualities of our loved ones internalized, and we carry them with us, and we move through grief with them as a partner. And we learn to integrate who they are, and that helps us redefine our narrative, helps us redefine our story. So I think, you doing your podcast out of Andy's bedroom with the baseball memorabilia and everything that reminds you of him, I think it's great. And for me, I have, pictures of my daughter. There's music that I can listen to regularly that will bring up memories that we've had where I feel connected and I feel her with me. So, we may do it differently,
Yeah.
but the results are the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So Jeannine's your middle one.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like she was quite a girl. I mean, really.
Yes, I was talking to in fact, interviewing another person for my podcast yesterday, and she's is very free-spirited, has a lot of the same energy I think that Jeannine has. And when I was telling her a little bit about Jeannine before we recorded, she said, "Boy, it sounds like I'd really like your daughter." I said, "Yeah, you two would get in a lot of trouble together." Um, and but that's the way she was. That's why I loved her. There were times that she frustrated the heck out of me, Marcy, just
Sure.
because there were days that I just was looking at her like, "What are you doing?" But then but I always loved her, so it wasn't going to change. And once she started smiling at me, that was it. You know, that
And
was it.
all
She
was
just
forgiven, right?
always forgiven. Once she flashed that smile, I said, "Okay, you're good." So I could never stay mad at her for too long.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about kind of what happened with Janine's health? Yeah.
Yeah, this was kind of a shock and to all of us, just in terms of how this transpired. And I'm going to
Yeah.
give you probably 3 or 4 different dates to kind of highlight my story, to tell you how life can just kind of turn on a dime.
Right.
May 2nd, 2002, Jeannine's only daughter, Brianna, was born.
Okay.
Um, During her pregnancy, she had injured her right foot in a freak accident, and her right foot continued to swell. It did not respond to traditional treatments for a swollen foot. Uh, she tried elevating it, they tried rest, they tried a walking boot, nothing worked. Finally, after Brianna was born, and they wanted to do an MRI sooner, but Jeannine said no, not until my child is born.
Mm-hmm.
They did an MRI, found an undefined 8 centimeter mass at the bottom of her foot. They did a biopsy. The biopsy found it to be highly suggestive for cancer.
Mm-hmm.
On May 26, she was diagnosed with alveolar rhabdomyosarcoma, a rare connective muscle tissue cancer. She was diagnosed on May 26th. Now, the week before, on May 19th, Marcy, I was informed by SUNY Albany that I had satisfactorily completed the requirements for my MSW. So now we have May 2nd. I'm a grandfather for the first time and overjoyed because of that chapter in my life. I'm overjoyed because I completed a 25-year higher education journey to get my master's.
Yeah.
And on May 26th, I find out that I have a terminally ill daughter.
Yeah.
On June
Because how old was
2nd,
she at this point?
she had just turned 18.
Yeah.
She had just turned 18 when she was diagnosed. Her 18th birthday is April 27th, 19 she was born April 27th, 1984. So she would
Mm-hmm.
have just turned 18.
Right.
And and then on June 2nd, we went to the Dana-Farber Hospital in Boston because they're one of the best hospitals in the world and the country for pediatric sarcoma research and treatment. In a 5-minute consult, they said she had a stage 4 tumor with bone marrow and lymph node involvement.
Wow.
Uh, there was no cure for the type of cancer that she had. And the only chance that we had, or she had, was undergoing aggressive chemotherapy until the cancer could be put in remission. Now, I teach a death, dying, and bereavement class at Utica University. I'm very transparent with my loss history, including
Mm-hmm.
the transition of Jeannine. So when I get to this part of the story, I ask my students, I said, "What do you think that you heard? And what do you think that my daughter heard?" Um, and I just don't sugarcoat it. And one of the student will never raise her hand and said, "You were told your daughter's going to die." I said, "Yeah, short of a miracle." That's what I was told.
Yeah.
That and the 5-year survival rate for her cancer, Mercy, depending on the research that I uncovered, was 10 to 15%,
Yeah.
which means she had an 85 to 90% chance of dying, transitioning, passing on, however your audience conceptualizes our final chapter in this world, within 5 years. And 10 months after her diagnosis, after 6 rounds of aggressive chemotherapy, which only put her cancer in 20% remission, she ended up,
Wow.
as I call it now, transitioning on March 1st, 2003, at home with hospice services. She had refused further treatment in May of 2003 because the
Yeah.
treatment was just
Just
causing more pain. It wasn't doing it. It wasn't doing
it would,
anything.
and honestly, 20% remission is just not at all good enough.
No,
Not organ.
she was at 80% remission, but 20% of
Yeah.
the cancer was still there. So
No,
you're
and
looking at it's
it's so
100% or
funny because
bust.
you might think if you're not a medical person, well, 80% is gone. That's down to 20%. That's not that bad, but that's terrible. I mean, you really, I mean, even when you get to 98, no one feels great about it,
No.
really, because
And,
when you've got 2% left, that means as soon as you stop, it's all going to just blow up anyway. So you have to get really all the way to even feel like there's a chance, and then
well,
oftentimes people who get to what we think is 100%, it's not. So 80%, wow, that's really not great.
no. And, you know, our, I wasn't there for, the final consult we had prior, to share the results because I'd forgotten. I think I had some work related obligation that I couldn't get out of. But I remember my wife Sherry calling me and said, the doctor thinks we have reason to celebrate. I said, well, what are you talking about? So our cancer's in 80% remission. And I told my wife, I said, it's 100% or bust.
Yeah.
And the 20% that was left, there was a new spot that had resurfaced, that hadn't resurfaced before. So that told me that that cancer was going to, was
Yeah.
remetastasizing again.
Yeah.
And after the holidays, she was fully involved. Her whole body was fully involved, and bones were fully involved with cancer. And then we were given a 1 to 3 month prognosis. And then shortly after that, Jeannine decided she wanted hospice services.
What a horrible journey to have to go through. New grandpa, and you feel like you were celebrating for just such a short time. And she just didn't have that much time to be a mama for her little
No,
one.
nope. But the time that she had with Brianna was meaningful. She gave all of her attention to her. We have a video of really Jannine's last few months of her life, and particularly her last Christmas. And my granddaughter and I, my granddaughter, Jannine's daughter, is now 23. We sat
Wow.
down a few years ago and watched that video because I wanted her to see how much her mother loved her and cared
Right.
for her.
Right.
And that was an emotional, and cathartic experience for me watching that with Jannine's daughter,
Yeah.
watching her see
I'm
how
sure it
much
was
her
for her
mother
as
loved her.
well to watch her mom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was. And I get chills just talking about that part of the journey, but it was a necessary piece. And I think sometimes we need to revisit our own grief, not so much for us, but for
Yeah.
others that
Mhm.
are connected with those that we've lost.
Well, talk about your grief journey and kind of how things started after the loss of Janine.
Well, first of all, for anybody that's experienced the death of a child or a loved one due to a terminal illness, there is grief before the actual physical passing.
Yep.
I grieved the loss of Janine's spirit, the loss of her physicality, the loss of her personality. And as even in early grief, we talk about the birthdays and we talk about the death anniversary dates, or as I call them, angelversary dates. But for individuals who have lost someone to cancer, it's the date that they were first diagnosed. It's the date that they went into remission. It's the date that the cancer came back. It's the date that their loved one decided against further treatment. All of those dates, and it's been 22 years, Marcy, actually over 22 years. And I still remember those dates as vividly as if they happened yesterday.
Yeah.
And so that's the one piece is that we grieve the loss of the person that we had because of the disease. The other part of that, in early grief, all the training that I had as a therapist, all the training that I had working with individuals with their own trauma, didn't even remotely prepare me
Yeah.
for the path I was about to walk. There is no book in the world, there is no blueprint in the world that prepares a parent for burying their child. It's just an unnatural event. It's not supposed to happen, but yet it does.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, I'd love to live in a world where all of our children outlived us, but
Right.
that would be obviously a utopian type of society, and obviously we're far from that at this point. But in early grief, it was difficult. The first year was extremely excruciating. The second year was even worse
Yeah.
because the reality of the first year the reality of what I was going to be facing moving on in the second year hit me in that second year. First year was kind of surreal. I kind of figured, well, Jeannine was going to come out of her bedroom and say, hey, Dad, we're just kidding. I'm back. We're going to give your life is back the way it is. We're going to pick up where we left off. 1 year to a day after she transitioned, I knew that wasn't the case. So I was faced with not only excruciating pain, but emptiness. What helped me in the beginning was, and I have to credit my wife Sherry for this, she found a really good bereaved parent support group that was sponsored by a local funeral home in our area. And one of the things that I had felt, and I know a lot of other parents who I've talked to have felt this way, is that they just really felt alone. They felt that
Yeah.
this was the only, they were the only ones in the world that had experienced this, and not because they were, it's just because this type of a loss just kind of disconnected me from myself. It disconnected me from the world as I knew it. And I was trying to figure out how am I going to navigate a world without my daughter? So
Yeah.
it was that type of disconnection. But once I went and walked into that parent support group and saw 18 other parents that were there that had lost a child, I didn't feel alone in my pain.
Yeah.
And in fact, our pain, and I share this frequently, our shared pain became a gateway to each other's hope. We could share our pain without judgment. We could share our pain and expect that it was going to be honored, expect that it was going to be validated. So for me, it was helpful not only to have that kind of support, but to see other parents who are 4 or 5 years ahead to see what they had done
Exactly.
to get to that point. Because I'm thinking 4 or 5 years, I can't even get through 10 minutes.
Right.
I said, how am I going to get through 5 years?
Right.
And now it's been through 22. So that has been that was very, very helpful to me.
No
And then,
question. I feel like that was so powerful to me because I kept looking at some of those people that were a little bit further on in the road. And the thought that would come to me was, well, they did it. So maybe I can. Because I
yeah,
still didn't really believe that I could. Because like you said, I mean, I'm living minutes at a time, days at a time. We started going to support group 3 weeks after Andy died, and I was still having trouble every Wednesday, right? Because Dandy died on a Wednesday. And then pretty soon it was I would have a bad day on the 15th of every month.
yeah,
And because you're just looking those dates and these milestones and it's been 3 months, how has it been 3 months? And looking at people that are years ahead, you think you can't do it. But when you're in that group, now you're faced with the possibility that maybe I can. If they
mhm,
can, maybe I can. It's no guarantee, but there's maybe a chance that I can get to that point, that I can be 5 years down the road, or I can be a year down the road, or anything.
absolutely. And the other thing that also helped Marcy is I had started teaching at Utica University about in January of 2023, about 8 weeks before Jeannine transitioned, and I had gotten the offer of the job. I think in that had to be in the summer of 2022 when there was an
Or
upswing in her
2002, you
condition.
mean?
Or
2002?
2002, yeah,
Yeah,
excuse me, 2002,
yeah.
yeah.
I was like,
Um,
now you've said it wrong a couple times, so we got to clarify. This is still over 20 years ago, not 2 years ago. So,
that's right,
yeah.
2 years. Yeah, so 2000
22
and
years ago. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 22 years
23
ago.
years ago.
Yeah, 23 years ago. So,
Uh-huh.
but anyway, um, I had gotten the offer in 2002 and in the summer and for the following spring semester. So January I started. Jeannine obviously transitioned during my first year of teaching, which
Wow.
trying to adjust to the college environment, dealing with the death of a child was daunting for me. But that
Well,
entire
especially
community,
since they're around her age too,
oh yeah,
right? I mean,
absolutely, yeah,
she was a
yeah,
college age
yeah,
when she
yeah,
passed. So now
yeah.
you're looking at college students all the time. I know I had trouble. I'm a pediatrician and going into the office and seeing teenage boys was a problem. It was hard to
Oh
look
yeah.
at kids that were wearing something that your son might have liked or just those
Mhm.
things. They're just little reminders all the time. Mhm.
Yeah, 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 and the thing about that whole community rallied around me, my students, the staff, the faculty, and there were days I didn't have the energy to do a night class.
Yeah.
But one of the students would come up to me and say, Mr. Roberts, Dave, that, and I let them call me. I tell them I prefer to be gone on a first name basis. I wasn't born a mister, I wasn't born a sir. I'll say, we really like the class that you did. You really are helping me get through this material. I really like the way you teach. All of that stuff motivated me to take one more step forward and then
Mm-hmm.
another step forward and then another step forward. Or a lot of times they would just kind of smile at me. And many of the students knew, the faculty knew. And so early on with the support that I got from the bereaved parent support group and from the Utica University community, that got me through a lot of tough moments in early grief.
Yeah.
And then eventually I began to do some writing. I began to present some workshops in the, to in honor of my daughter and to try to re-engage in life with meaning and with purpose. And this went like this for about 7 years. And then 7 years, there was a turning point for me where, as I mentioned as before we recorded, I had a spiritually transformative experience with an interfaith minister that from Long Island that I met through pure serendipity that allowed me to find peace with Jeannine's transition while still honoring the grieving process and believing that our loved ones are always with us, that our consciousness survives, and we can connect with our loved ones anytime we want through creating continued bonds with them in spirit.
Mm-hmm. So, when did you start teaching a class on the death, dying, and bereavement?
That started probably in the early 2000s. I want to say 2000 and maybe 2008, right around
Okay.
there. And I'm
Okay.
still I'm
So
still
four or
teaching
five
that
years
class.
after
Uh-huh.
losing Jeannine.
Yeah, I think, yeah, just about that. And I'm continuing to teach that class now, and I will until I decide to retire from teaching, or unless they have another plan for that. But it's actually my favorite course to teach. I love teaching all of my courses, but that is my favorite because I think it's the most meaningful for me. It's personal, and plus each year that I continue to grow as a result of the challenges with Jeannine's transition, I learn more and more about myself. I learn more and more about my grief that I can communicate to my students as I am learning it.
Hmm. And I think I read too when you, because I've read your book, and now spoiler alert, he has a book, but that you feel like your students teach you often as much as you teach them, and some of these things too,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, one of my students in one of her papers that she wrote on Tuesdays with Maury said something to the fact that I want to make sure the life that I'm living is a life that I want to die with. And that was
Yeah.
profound to me.
Yeah.
That was profound to me. And we use that quote in the book. And my students teach me, I think, more than I teach them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't you talk about that transformative experience that you had on Long Island a little bit? I know
Okay.
obviously you wrote an entire book on it, so we can't go way into as
Yeah.
much as you wrote about, but I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Well, and I'll give you the condensed version because I think
Yeah.
as I was saying before we went on the air to record. If I gave you the full version, this would be another podcast. So
Yeah.
I met an interfaith minister from Long Island by the name of Patty Farino. And Marcy, we would not have met had her computer not shut off when she was trying to register for a conference that I was organizing. She had all of her workshops picked out. She had her credit card information inserted. She hit register, computer just blacked out. So she had to call me and we shared stories. I told her about Jeannine. She told me about her work as an interfaith minister with parents who had experienced the death of their own children in Long Island, who were involved with the Angel of Hope ministry. It's a statue that's erected in honor of children who have passed, and parents will go there to honor their children. We met at the workshop that I was sponsoring, at the conference that I helped sponsoring, and she said to me, she goes, "If you ever get to my Long Island, I'll show you my Long Island." I said, "Okay." Now, prior to this, during our conversation, she asked me, "Do you believe in science?" And, I've always been science-based. And I said, Pat, I really don't buy into that as much just because I'm science-based, but I think my daughter sent me a double rainbow on Father's Day.
Yeah.
And so at the conference, she hugs me and she goes, "I think your daughter sent me a rainbow." And I'm thinking, okay. I'm tired. I just said, "That's great," but I didn't pursue it any further.
Right.
So rainbows kind of connected us as well, too.
Uh-huh.
So I'm driving along, taking three of our conference presenters into the Adirondacks. I live in upstate New York. The Adirondacks are pretty in the fall, very picturesque colors. So I wanted to take them to the Adirondacks, and this was the day after the conference. So they're having this very intense discussion about spirituality. All of a sudden, I look up at the sky and said, I want to be where they are.
Yeah.
And all I wanted was to have some more spiritual understanding or more knowledge of spirituality to help me get to the next step. And I just spontaneously yelled this out to God or the universe, whoever we believe our higher power is, because my soul needed something that my brain and my mind didn't realize it needed. My soul was crying out for more. So fast forward to November, I end up finding myself in Long Island with Patty. We went to a training called Embracing the Power of Change, which was being put on by a then colleague. After the training, we went to her house. She said, get into something comfortable, come into my sacred space she had for candles, fireplace, spiritual memorabilia. And from there, it was a weekend where I was convinced of the survival of consciousness of my daughter, and that her spirit was very much alive, and that I could connect with her spirit and learn to integrate my grief by transforming the relationship with her. That led to that weekend spurred 10 years of marathon conversations about how psychology and spirituality could merge to help individuals transcend challenge and the importance of critical thinking for the younger generation. Now, one of the things, without getting too much into the experience, some people will read this and think, well, it's not believable. And I would get that. Okay, I would get that. However, one of the things that Pat and I talked about is, what do you believe? And what a person believes is what they believe. And as long as it helps them to find peace, as long as it helps them to find clarity, who am I to question that? It's what that person's belief does for them. So I tell individuals, read the book, read it with an open mind. You don't have to believe everything that happened, but take a look at the impact that it had on me and go from there. I think too often, one of the things I've run into, and I think you might have run into this too, is that, well, my grief is better than yours. This is how I grieve is better than the way you grieve. And there's no right or wrong way to grieve.
No.
It's whatever is going to work for you, whether it's faith-based, whether it's through scripture, whether it's through interfaith, who cares? As long as it works. For me, I was raised Catholic. I'm not a regular church goer, but I take some value for me from scripture that has been important, that's helped me. I take a little bit of Native American teachings of animals and nature. I take a little bit of Buddhism. It all works. And as long as it works, and as long as it's helping me find peace, and as long as everybody else is doing in their grief journey helps them find peace, who are we to judge that? And who am I to judge that? So we talked about, what is it that you believe? I've learned that we do not have to eliminate our core beliefs to add additional beliefs that can align with that perspective or complement that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's belief expansion. What is it that I can add here that's going to help me get through this part of my life? And Marcy, had I had moved through grief with the same set of beliefs and values that I had prior to Jeannine's transition, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. My journey demanded that I needed to embrace different perspectives about how I saw myself, how I saw the world, how I saw my values, if I were going to re-engage in life with meaning again, while still honoring the grief that I am always going to experience until the day that I am reunited with my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love how you said that about how you don't have to give up things. It's just kind of integrating more information in. Like, for example, I told you I've got a Christian background. I'm very involved in my church, and certainly it's not something that is really talked about in church as getting signs or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are definitely a lot of Christians that really don't like even talking about that as kind of a possibility. But I have to say, in my life since losing Andy, I see cardinals when I need to see cardinals, right? When
Hmm.
I'm going through something, and I get emotional about it, because when I'm going through something really hard, one of my friends, I learned that her niece had been killed in a car accident. I learned early on a Sunday morning. We decide still we're going to church. I'm emotional. We back out of the driveway. There's a cardinal right there. On Andy's birthday, there are days when I will pray. Like there was a day Eric took the day off. We went to the Y. We went for a walk. It was the 5 year, I think, anniversary of Andy's death. And I said, God, I could sure use a cardinal right about now. As we're walking out of the Y, and we get in the car and drive home, and a cardinal flies right in front of the car. I mean, cardinals, when I'm coming into the neighborhood and leaving the neighborhood, they will just one, usually one male cardinal will just be there. And, I'll have a hard day. I go to the cemetery, whatever. I come home,
Hmm.
there it will be. And it's happened so much that I can't just say it's chance. I can't. I can't. And it brings me feeling of comfort,
Yeah.
and whether God sends me the cardinal or Andy sends me the cardinal or whoever sends me the cardinal, doesn't matter. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter because that cardinal will help me in that moment. I mean, I went out in the hot tub, it was a while ago, and a cardinal came and flew into a tree above me and just sang. And I just feel like Andy was just singing to me. And, because
Hmm.
we talked about how powerful music was and how important music was in Andy's life. And that cardinal would just sing. There was a time a few weeks ago, I was emailing somebody. I was emailing a mom back. And the cardinal was singing the whole time I was emailing. And then I got distracted. I had to go inside. Then I came back outside. I was doing something else. Nothing happened. As soon as I started emailing that woman again, the cardinal started singing. And like, okay, clearly I'm supposed to write her back because this cardinal, every time I open up the email to email her, this bereaved mom, the cardinal sings. So
Hmm.
it's just these things that happen that I can't explain logically, certainly, in my physician background or anything like that. And it's not exactly biblical, but it helps me a lot. I've been to a
Yeah.
bereaved moms retreat. We went to a bereaved moms retreat 2 years ago. There was a cardinal that kept trying to fly into the window. It was like,
Yeah.
and I get there and like, there's this cardinal that is just going crazy and keeps trying to fly in
Hmm.
here. And I just feel like, yeah, that's for me. I mean, you know?
Yeah. And a sign is always a product of what's going on in the present. I mean, sometimes, Mercy, a butterfly can be a butterfly, and other times it has significance, particularly if we're thinking of our loved ones.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the things is that I've kind of learned myself that science can't explain everything, but it doesn't mean that what science can't explain isn't real. If it's real
Right.
for us, if we have a sense of peace as a result of what happens, then who's to question that? I can't consensually validate your subjective experience with a sign that you believe you've gotten from Andy, no more than you can validate a sign that I got from Jeannine.
Yeah.
But if we sit down, and I think we mentioned this in our book, When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister, you sit down and you ask questions about the significance of that event. How did it help you, you know, transcend? What did you learn about your grief as a result of that? Did that give you a sense of peace? If that's all of that, then it's real for the individual, and we need to respect that without judging it. We need to just bear witness to it and just behold the awe of the universe and behold the many different ways that God works through the universe, manifest. And
And,
and I
and that's
and
what I love about what you said is that I can add that to
Mhm.
my faith and my spirituality and not take away something that I already have, right? I
I-
can just add that in, that kind of piece.
and if we can do that with each other, if we can add the things that we think align with our belief systems, though they may be different, we can find some common ground, and then we can find more similarities within the difference. If you have a faith-based community, like, in your Christian church, you're connected to something that's greater than yourself. That community is powerful to be great. And I may be connected to not so much a religious community, but a spiritual community that where I am connected to something greater than myself. So whether we're talking about being connected to a spiritual community, whether we're talking about being connected to a religious community, we're still creating some type of awareness and awe and spiritual connection because of that connection to something that's greater than ourselves. So whether we're faith-based, whether we're interfaith,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's not there's similarity if we take the time to take a look at it.
So you had that big experience that weekend in Long Island, but your relationship with Patty has continued over many years. So talk about
Yeah,
that.
it was funny because when we were done, she looked at me and she goes, this is no guarantee that the relationship is going to continue because she had boundaries and she was also very private with what she could do, with
Yeah.
how she saw the world. And I said, Pat, I understand it perfectly. I said, but if you gave me nothing else, you gave me a different perspective to look at. You
Yeah.
gave me food for thought that now I have to try to make room for other perspectives and entertain other perspectives that could align with my belief system. But as it turned out, the universe kind of conspired to say, yeah, you two need to continue the relationship. So we started having marathon conversations, 3 or 4 hours at a time at night. My wife at the time was a registered nurse and she was working evenings. Her husband was involved in Long Island in some pool tournaments and softball. So we had evenings where we could just talk.
Uh-huh.
So Patty would throw out a spiritual concept. She goes like, have you explored Native American teachings of animals or nature? And I said, let me take a look at this. And I'd keep track of an animal or an animals that came into my site, and I would take a look at the teaching. And I would say, this aligns with something I'm dealing with right now. And I said, I called her back up. I said, I think this could work. I think I can make room for this for
Uh-huh.
Native American teachings into my science-based background. And so it was like that. And the work that I did with Patty, with Jeannine, and helping me find peace and a different perspective after she transitioned also helped me to do some healing in other areas of my life, particularly with understanding the reasons that my father left when I was 5 years old for my mother to raise me as an only child and my mother's overprotectiveness. And it all stemmed from the fact that Patty said, don't limit yourself to just me as a spiritual teacher. Get other spiritual teachers who align with what you're looking for. And it was Patty and another spiritual teacher really helped me come to peace with my father's decision to leave and my mother's decision to overprotect me. So the work that I did with Jeannine helped me heal a lot of trauma or a lot of unanswered questions that I had about my past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then talk about the book and how that kind of started and came to be.
This was a product of me over the 10 years of our relationship telling Pat, I said, look, we got to write a book. We need to write a book. The world needs to know what you did for me, how you helped give me a different perspective, how our conversations can help people learn that by integrating different perspectives, they can come to a greater understanding of themselves and the world around them, and learn to transcend life challenges. She resisted it for a long time
Yeah.
because she was very private. She did not want to be looked at as somebody that was going to be viewed as a person that would do what she does for entertainment. That's never been her position. She goes, I do what I do because I want to help people find peace. Finally, during the pandemic, she said, yeah, I think it's time. And what we did is she had moved to South Carolina just before the pandemic hit. And it was her intuition that guided her to move when they moved. And we decided to write a book, and we did this through Google Docs.
Uh-huh.
We would write together. A lot of stuff would be intuitively coming through her. And it would be coming through her so fast, Marcy, that I couldn't keep up with typing. So I said, Pat, I said, let me buy a mini recorder. I'm going to record our conversations, then transcribe it. So essentially, a lot of the book was information that was intuitively coming through Patty, me transcribing it. I was kind of like the voice for the book with
I
her
was
in the
going to say, because the
background.
book is in your voice and it's written
Yeah,
from your perspective too.
it's And she wanted it to be that way where it would be written in my voice and she would kind of like be the guiding voice in the background,
Okay.
you know. And so that's exactly how it worked out. But it was her influence, it was her teachings that really shaped us writing the book together. And she always calls me the writer in the group, but she's also the muse behind the writing of the book. So she's very much inspired the words that came into that book, the structure of the book, everything. And it's a book that we're very proud of. We think that it will help anybody who reads it. It certainly will give them a different perspective to think about. We hope it gets in the hands of as many people as that need it as possible.
Because it's been out for a few years now, right?
2021,
Yeah.
March,
Yeah.
we rolled it out March 1st, 2021, and March 1st was obviously the date that Jeannine transitioned. So we did
Yeah.
that. So it's been out for, it's gone a little over 4 years now. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
But we think the book has a timeless message. It's a book that I think you can pick up 10 years from now and you'll still get something out of it. So,
My favorite part really came towards the end when you were talking about the power of storytelling and the privilege that comes with having stories told to you. I'd love for you to go into that a little bit for listeners.
well, Marcy, I've heard so many stories over the years from individuals, bereaved parents, individuals who've experienced all kinds of loss. On the podcast, on my podcast, I hear a lot of stories from individuals who have transcended trauma. And a lot of times somebody will ask me, how can you sit and listen to stories of loss and tragedy? Doesn't that depress you? I said, no, on the contrary, it inspires me.
Yeah.
Because when somebody chooses you to share the most intimate details of their lives, whether it's a birth, whether it's a marriage, and particularly a death, they're telling you by sharing those intimate details that they feel that you are safe, that you will hold space, you will honor that story. And it's a privilege to be able to carry those stories because not only it inspires me to continue to do what I do, but I also learn a lot from their stories and it's things that I can incorporate in my grief. So the individuals who allow me to sit for their stories end up teaching me as much as I as hopefully they learn from me.
Yeah. I
So
love that. That is the word that I use too, privilege. Privilege.
yeah.
Because I get that. People ask me that all the time. I mean, I work as a pediatrician and that's
hmm
my, day job. And I obviously listen to parents and their struggles with their kids. And then on my days off, I talk to parents whose children have died.
Yes.
People think that seems a little crazy that I would do that that's what I do on my days off. But it is a privilege.
Mm-hmm.
It is a privilege to have these stories told. And it is a privilege for me to be able to help all of these people share their children with others and share their deep pain and deep feelings with other people and help
Yep.
that. I mean, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful.
Yeah. And I think too, as you being a pediatrician, me being a former therapist, I think we know when we need to have some time for ourselves and get back in balance. So,
Yeah.
and as long as we can continue to do that, we can be a placeholder for anybody's stories, as long
Yeah.
as we can find that balance between taking care of others and taking care of ourselves. And I was also thinking as a pediatrician, you must see kids that have childhood cancer.
Yeah.
You must have seen that. And we know that like 1 out of 5 children, I think the statistics, 1 out of 5 children will die of cancer. Even though it's like an 80% success rate, and I
Yeah.
tell my students this, if there's an 80% success rate with childhood cancer, you're still going to be dealing with a family who's experienced the death of a child. And you need to know what those unique challenges are and how to be able to hold space for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think about too my old pastor who has since retired. Whenever he would announce a death in the church, he would say, "It is my somber privilege to tell you." And that meant a lot to me when I started reading that because he started doing that, well, I think he started doing it before I lost Andy, but after I lost Andy, it meant something different to me. That choice of words. This
Yeah.
is my somber privilege to do that, because that's what he really thought of it as, to make this announcement that someone has died and gone on to heaven, that it is my somber privilege to share this with you, but it is a privilege. It is. It's not something to regret, and like, it's not just sadness in that. So
No.
I just love it. And that, like I said, it was my favorite part of the book. You talked about it a few times, about that storytelling, and about how when you have stories shared with you, that there are things to be cherished.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that I will firmly continue to believe until the day it's my time to be called to be with my daughter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, is there something that you feel like you really would like to share with the listeners, knowing that most of the listeners here are bereaved parents
Yep.
themselves? Because it's been, over 20 years for you. So, share some words of wisdom.
Well, first and foremost, most is I tell every parent to show grace to themselves. This is a challenging journey. Grief is not a linear process. There's no end point. There's no beginning point. Our grief is going to be ongoing because, as I mentioned, death ends a life, not a relationship. And we're going to grieve the loss of that relationship at certain times when we want our loved ones to be there, whether it's a family reunion, whether it's a wedding of a relative. We need to honor that and make room for our grief to resurface at any time during our life cycle. But for me, don't be afraid to embrace new perspectives. Don't be and understand that in many ways you are more resilient than you think you are.
Yes.
And the other losses that we have had in our lives can help us develop resilience to our worst nightmare. And that has helped me. The other thing is don't hesitate to avail yourself of support. Don't think anybody is not going to want to sit down and talk with you, especially somebody who's been through your journey or is very sensitive to trauma and tragedy. They're going to want to hold space for it. They're going to want to be a placeholder for your story. So don't sell yourself short to think that your story may not be as important or that you may not be as important because of the other things that you may have been experiencing. Show yourself grace. Show yourself some gentleness towards yourself. A lot of times we are beset by guilt over the what ifs, the should haves, the could haves, the would haves. I thought that if I had convinced my daughter to do one more clinical trial, if I had seen the signs of her cancer sooner, that I could have saved her. I realize now that I did the best that I could given the circumstances that I
Mm-hmm.
found myself in, and that I've also learned that my daughter wanted to live on her terms, but she also wanted to die on her terms. And I've had to come to accept that. And so, and open yourself up to the wonders of the universe. Our loved ones, I believe, will communicate with us through science. They can't communicate with us through science. And whatever your belief system is, just understand that I think for me, God kind of manifests in a lot of different ways. So that's some of the things that have randomly come into my head, Marcy. So I
Beautiful.
think I think that's where I think I'm going to stop.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing Jeannine with us today and sharing your story with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Marcy, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on, and I look forward to our conversation for my podcast in September.
Yes. Oh, and the name of your podcast, you should bring that up to
I
people.
should, yes. The name of the podcast is the Teaching Journeys Podcast. It's on Apple, Spotify, on other podcast channels. It's also on YouTube as well too. So if you Google my name, the podcast will come up. And I've had a lot of individuals who have transcended loss, parents who have lost children, a lot of good therapists, a lot of good coaches who have some really good information to share that can help
Mhm.
individuals transcend trauma. So, and the mantra of the podcast is we're all students and teachers, so let's learn from each other. Every time that I
Beautiful.
have a guest on the show, I'm the student, they're the teacher.
Well, and share that name of that book one more time. It is a unique name, so I think
Yes.
people will remember it if you mention it one more time.
Yeah, When the Psychology Professor Met the Minister. You can find it on Amazon in Kindle format and in paperback format.
Yeah. Thank you again.
My pleasure, Marcy. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening. If you found this helpful and would like to support the podcast, please leave a 5-star rating and comment. To help financially, you can type Andy's Mom, one word, to the number 53555. This provides a link to GiveButter, which allows donations through PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, or credit cards. GiveButter will provide a receipt of your tax-deductible donation. Or you can visit the donation page at andysmom.com/donate. Always Andy's Mom is a registered 501c3 and can receive donations through Thrivent Financial and Benevity. Marcy loves hearing from listeners. Please feel free to reach out to her via email at marcy@andysmom.com or on the Instagram or Facebook Always Andy's Mom accounts. Sign up for the email list to get weekly episode links as well as pictures of Marcy's guests and their children. Together, let's work to inspire hope, one day at a time.